Alright, welcome to the second video. In this first of the two-part video, we're going to look at the meaning of modals. Particularly, we're going to focus on modal verbs. I'll introduce you to a couple of the marginal modals and also group together some of the semi-modals. And the last thing we'll take a look at in each of the videos is additional lexical verbs that add modality sense to a sentence. Okay, so again, please make sure that you follow along in your study guide. For both of these two videos, you have to be able to identify the functions of the various modal verbs, and using the examples I give you in this video, you then have to apply that information to new examples in the study guide. Okay, good luck. All right, so in this category on the assessing the degree to which something will happen, we have a number of subcategories. Certainty, which will be marked throughout the video with the CERT indication. Probability and possibility. The probability or possibility that something happens, the chance. Certainty deals with that it is definitely certain it will happen or it won't happen. And we deal with degrees you're going to see. Assessment of facts. This is determining whether something is true or speculative or habitual. Deductions. Making a deduction. That is having some sort of logical information in front of you, and then from that information coming up with a final statement. That's a deduction. And then finally, predictions. Predictions about the future, most likely. Predictions with evidence in front of you, or with limited or more research-based evidence in front of you. Okay. The first modal verb we're going to look at is can. Remember, can is one of the three top most frequently used modal verbs in English. And you're going to see why between these two videos, because it has multiple uses. In this case, it's often used in sentences which are true or which are usually the case. For example, steel can resist very high temperatures. Is this always the case? Yes. Is this sentence true? Yes, it can. We can look up this fact. So it's an assessment of a fact. It's almost like you're emphasizing this fact that it can resist. There's an emphasis there. The focus is on the resisting as opposed to the high temperatures. Used to indicate or assess logical possibilities. When we talk about it in this sense, we are determining whether something is logically possible. That is, using the information in our head or things like that. Can this truly happen, and to what degree can this happen? How can they be there already? They only left 10 minutes ago. How is it logically possible that they are where they're supposed to be if they left 10 minutes ago, and it normally takes more than 10 minutes to get there? So this person is questioning that possibility. Can means that something is most likely logically possible. Can't means that something is most likely logically not possible. To deny or negate logical deductions. This is very interesting. This can't is used as the negative form of must. Must is most often used for logical deductions. Something like a detective might use. But when we're negating that logical deduction, we can only use can. He can't be drunk. He only had a couple of beers. So a couple of beers is the information I have in front of me. I'm negating that somebody says he is drunk because he only had a couple of beers. So I can't say he mustn't be drunk. I have to say he can't be drunk. He can't be drunk is the negative form of must. And that's very important. Could is the next one. Could is right in the middle. Could often is paired with can for multiple reasons, because sometimes could represent a historical past sense of a can. And they also have very similar uses, where can indicate that something is logically possible, could indicate that something has a weak possibility or weak probability of happening. We could all be having holidays on the moon within 30 years. Certainly that's a probability. Is it a strong possibility with the information we have in front of us right now? No. So it's a weak probability, but we're not discounting it. There's still a small chance that it's possible. Used to indicate a degree of certainty, and we're going to take a look a little later at the degree of certainty and where could find. It has like a weak probability. It has a lower form of certainty than may. I suppose he could have spent the day in the office, but I did not see him. I did not see him. Just because I did not see him doesn't mean he wasn't here. So there is a degree of certainty. But the implication is, if he was here, I probably would have seen him. So it's still almost, maybe 50-50, 60-40, 40-60. Used to make suggestions. When you're suggesting to somebody that you do something or you're giving them advice, then you could use could. Could is often used to make suggestions. I could cook dinner tonight, and then you could cook it some other night. It's a suggestion, okay? And very often, could is used to make suggestions. Notice that can is not used to make suggestions. May. Again, may, like could, falls into the middle of the frequency. May is more in use in English than, let's say, might, although may and might are often paired together. Like could, it indicates a weak probability. It may or may not get to you by the end of the week. Meaning, if I order something through Amazon.uk and I want it by the end of the week, they're telling me it may, it's possible, or it may not, it's not possible. So they're giving it, even adding that may not is making it even weaker than normal. Used to indicate general truths in a very formal way. So usually this is found in academic writing. Things like frog spawn may be found in riverbeds at that time of the year. This is a general truth. We're not dealing with any type of certainty. We're just, again, like with can, we're focusing on the truth of the statement, and we're focusing on the found. The stress is on may be found in the riverbeds. So again, it's an assessment and it's indicating a general truth, but it's very formal, often used in writing. Used to indicate a degree of certainty, like could, again. She may be an actress, but I think I would have seen her in something. I see a lot of films. Again, it's the degree of certainty is not strong, but again, it's, she could be an actress. It's certain or it's uncertain. It's, sort of in the middle. Used to give in, to concede something, a concession, often accompanied by well and followed by but. It's a very, very common expression in English to say something like, I may well be in danger of stating the obvious, but I shall state it anyways, using the may well and then but. You're conceding something, okay? So the concession here is stating the obvious, but I'm going to state it anyways, okay? A concession. Now, what's interesting is you've noticed already that can, could, and may, and then we're going to see with might, all deal with possibility and probability. We can often use what's called a cline, and that is a slanted line that looks like this, to indicate the degree of something. In this case, we're going to deal with the degree of something is believed to be a fact, as opposed to possible or speculative. So in terms of these four modals, where do we think they fall Are they closer to the top or are they closer to the bottom? Well, can, if we use can, it indicates that something is truly, truly believed to be a fact. It's pretty close to being a fact. On the other hand, could and may make things a bit more speculative. And might, if we use might in one of these sentences, it makes it very speculative. So can is, it indicates that something is probably a fact. Could and may might be a fact, but we add that degree of speculation now. Might possibly not, and very, very speculative. So again, this is a cline. We're going to see a couple of clines throughout these videos. All right, might. Again, we've seen that might is used to indicate a very, very weak probability or possibility. Very, very speculative. So I'm going to buy a digital camera. Yeah, and I might buy a video camera as well. That's very speculative. You know, I don't know, will I have enough money? Do I really need a video camera if I have a digital camera? It's a very, very speculative indication. Used to indicate a polite or indirect suggestion, used frequently with the words like or want. Again, notice this is where we start to get into this concept of politeness. If you want to suggest something very politely, then you might use might. I won't go any further with it now, but you might like to take a copy of this information with you. So I'm not going to tell you any more now, but I'm offering you very politely the opportunity to take some information away with you. So it's very polite, very formal situation. Used to indicate a weak degree of certainty, just like the weak degree of probability and possibility. I might go to the disco tomorrow night, but the last time I was there, I was bored. Yeah, a low level of certainty here. I didn't have fun last time, so I'm not really certain that I want to go back and not have fun again. So again, very weak. So notice that might is used mostly in weak situations or in very polite situations, very formal. Here's another cline for you. In this case, we're going to look at degrees of certainty with can't, could, may, might, and must. Must deals with certainty as well. We've already talked about the fact that can't and must are opposites in this case. If you're 100% certain, or are you 0% certain, or is there 50% chance of that you're certain, where do these fall? Must means that you're most likely certain. Must is very, very close to that 100%. As opposite, can't means that something is not certain. Not at all. Most likely uncertain, unlikely to happen. Could is closer to might. Something is likely to happen. It's just slightly above the 50%. But may, which we can use with the words like perhaps or maybe, is less than 50%. And might is just above can't. Again, that something is unlikely, but there's still a chance. Can't means that it's not likely. Might, unlikely, maybe there's a chance. May, perhaps, it has a stronger chance than might, but a less of a chance than could. So it really falls between that 50%, below that 50% area. All right, so again, looking at this cline tells us the degree of certainty of the various modals. Will. Will is the most frequently used modal in the English language. It has a lot of uses, primarily in marking the future, but also in terms of instant decisions, predictions, facts, certainty, things like that. It's a very, very popular, very, very highly used modal in English. So it's used to make predictions based on logical deductions. There's little or no physical evidence, or the evidence comes like from research, like from computer models that indicate what the weather will be. These are models. These aren't something I can see. So there really no physical evidence to it, but there's a lot of logical evidence. That'll be Jim at the door. He said he might stop by. So there's no physical evidence. I haven't looked out the window to see if it is Jim. I just know that Jim said he might stop by. So if I hear knocking at the door, it will be Jim. There's a strong deduction to be made there. Used to indicate habitual events. We can often say on Friday evening, we'll get takeout and just relax. This is probably a very habit-forming thing, but it's sort of a habit-forming thing that I'm going to do now in the future. I've done this in the past, now I'm going to do it on a specific date in the future, so we use the will formation. Used to indicate one's intentions, established at the time of speaking. An instant decision. We talked about this last week when we talked about marking the future. This is really a modal use. I'm afraid they won't be ready till 3 p.m. Okay, I'll come back at 3. When was this decision made? Right then and there at the moment of speaking. That's an instant decision. We use the will. It's often used when ordering food in a restaurant. Used to make an offer to display a willingness to do something. So if you're willing to do something for somebody, then like I'll carry that for you. We'll use will. It's not really a future use of will. It's just you're offering to do something. You have a willingness to carry those bags for somebody. Okay. So 4 uses for will. The predictions which we've seen, instant decisions which we've seen, habitual events in the future, and then used to make offers. The last one we did not see last week, but it's very, very important for will. We use it a lot. Shall. Shall is an interesting one because it's close, it's equated with will, but we only use shall with the first person pronouns I and we. So it has similar uses to will. It tends to be more formal, like in making predictions and instant decisions. While she is here, we shall never be able to put the past behind us. Okay, I'm making a prediction because she is here, and because I'm using we, I'm using shall. Remember, shall is the least frequent modal verb in English. It's very, very rare, and this is why. It's because it's only used really with these 2 pronouns. We're going to see a bit later in video 2, there's one additional use where it's not used with these 2 pronouns, but that use is extremely rare. Used to make offers, again, these tend to be a little bit more formal. So, as soon as Bob returns, Ken, shall I give you a ring? This is probably something said in an office situation, between colleagues, so you're being a bit more formal than using will. And again, I use I, so I use the shall. Used to give advice or suggestions. Shall we go for a walk in the garden? This is often in a question form. Okay? And again, shall we, shall I, used in that way. This is would. Okay. Remember, would is the second most frequently used modal in English. Would has a lot of uses beyond modality. It very often refers to things that are very hypothetical. Possibility to happen, but very, very speculative. Used to indicate past habitual actions, often in narratives and formal context. This is the other major use, is that it sometimes is used as a past-like formation for will. Will can be used to indicate habitual actions, but if we're talking about them in the past and we're talking about them, let's say, in a story or in an academic writing text, then I would use would as opposed to will, especially if they're in the past. Every morning the waiters would come down the long veranda with plates of pastries and urns of coffee. I took this from a piece of literature. It's a narrative. It tends to be, they're placing it in a more formal context, and it's a past habitual action. Used to offer advice and suggestions, but with hedging. You know, when you add would to an advice or a suggestion, there's almost a level of uncertainty there. And we often use it with these verbs: advice, imagine, recommend, say, suggest, and think. So I would always recommend a softer bed than a harder one. So I recommend a softer bed than a harder one, but if I want to soften that just a bit, I add would and it hedges it. It makes it a bit softer, not as strong a suggestion. Okay, now when we talk about habitual actions, we can often use some form of timeline. So we've seen timelines in the past. Um, we can draw our timeline like we have in the past. If we want to represent habitual present and future, we can do that with will. And if we want to do habitual past, we can either use used to or would. Now, real easy timeline, you can show it. What's interesting here is we can also use used to. Used to is less formal than would. And it's very, very, as you're going to see here in this line, that when we talk about formal, when we talk about present or future formal, will is used along the whole continuum. It doesn't matter. But when we talk about it in terms of the past, would tends to be more formal, used to tends to be less formal. Okay, so you might find would more in academic text, in writing like news and fiction, and you're going to find used to more in spoken conversation. Should. Should falls right in the middle here. It's used pretty considerably in English for various types of things. One thing it's used to is indicate the likelihood. This is a frequent use of this modal, how probable or possible something is. We need a few days to install the new furnace, but by Tuesday everything should be back to normal. The likelihood is good that everything should be back to normal, but there's still a degree of uncertainty, just a slight degree. And so therefore it makes it a probability possibility. It's very often used to make suggestions or to offer advice. We should leave tomorrow if you don't want to miss any of the conference. I'm making a suggestion here. I'm giving you some advice. Must. Be very, very careful with must in native speakers. Native speakers tend to shy away from using must. You notice that must sort of fell into the bottom half of frequency. It's really fallen out of favor because it can be viewed as a very harsh word in English. So be very careful using it. Its most frequent use is to make deductions, okay, especially in spoken text. I'm 28, so he must be 27. He's a year younger than me. Yes, he must be 27. Okay, so you're making a logical deduction here. And again, this is most likely in a spoken context. If the modal verb must followed by had and then the past participle, which is, by the way, called the perfect infinitive, it always refers to a deduction. So if you ever see something like this, I must have been on the phone. Sorry, I missed you. That's always considered to be some sort of deduction. Used to indicate a negative deduction in informal context using mustn't. Remember, we said the can't is used for negative deduction in formal situations. This is in speaking, we find that people tend to be a little bit more lazy in their speaking, and sometimes they're just negating the must and making it mustn't. That can't be right. We have driven for 30 miles. This might be if I'm in a car with my colleague and we seem to be lost. But if I'm talking to a friend, oh, you mustn't have filled it in because the machine will not read that. That's very conversational. I would focus on can't as more so than mustn't. Okay, the first of the marginal modal verbs, ought to. Ought to is a very strange one. Students find it very difficult to pronounce, very difficult to use. It's not that difficult. It's really like should. It indicates a degree of likelihood. I really ought to go outside and get some fresh air. Okay? That's highly likely. It's less frequent than should. It's very often only used in the affirmative. You find it very rarely in the interrogative form, and if so, it's very, very formal. The negative, the negative, oughtn't to, is very rare. I wouldn't even teach it to your students. The past form, again, can be difficult because it's ought to plus have plus past participle. So it's ought to plus the perfect infinitive. Again, this is not something I would teach my students. I would teach my students to use ought solely in the affirmative present. Used to. Used to can be difficult because, like would, it's used to indicate a past habitual action. She used to do ballet. Okay. Now the difference here is that it tends to be informal, very conversational. The negative is derived two ways. Didn't used to, notice the D on used not to. The interrogative is formed two ways. Did plus the subject used to, or used plus the subject to. So be careful. Can be difficult to teach. It's very commonly used when you talk about habits that are completely over and very much in the past. So the semi-modals we can use in this category include be going to make predictions. We've seen this. Have to or have got to make deductions, which is much more. These are deductions that really come from outside the speaker, from society, from the community, from the rules, from the law. Be about to, be due to. I'll deal with certainty. Something is about to happen. Something is due to happen. It gives it a high level of certainty. Be likely to, be likely that deals with probability. Again, it's a high level probability. And the last two, be meant to and be supposed to. Again, notice the past forms here. These also deal with certainty. These have less certainty than be about to and be due to. So be about to and be due to have a higher degree of certainty than be meant to or be supposed to. And then finally, here are some verbs that also express possibility. There's a whole list here. To appear, believe, expect, feel, gather. Guess, know, look, promise, reckon. Seem, sound, suppose, tend, think. Often if you use these, like, I reckon that's him, you're expressing a degree of possibility. I suppose that's him. It sounds like him. It seems like it might be him. Okay? And again, sometimes how you say it, how it's used, depends on its level of possibility. These can have wide ranges of possibility, and of course, all of these can be made negative. I reckon I do not reckon. I do not appear. He does not appear. He does not sound like the one guy I know. So they form the negative in a very, very common way. So that's the end of this first video. I know it's pretty long, about 30 minutes. I apologize, but it's a lot of information. And you're going to continue on now to video 3. Okay, so I will see you in video 3.